Are you saying that when whites become a minority, they might be treated differently than the way whites had treated the minorities?
I think, as a matter of fact, this may be a very unfashionable thing to say, but if you look at American history of the last 50 years, whites have treated minorities with the kind of munificence and a kind of generosity that is unprecedented in the history of the world. Whites are still the majority in this country, and yet whites have instituted institutions that discriminate against their own people. If you want to apply to an Ivy League college or even to a state university or a community college, do you think you're better off being a white male or a black female? Everybody knows the answer to that question. And that is while whites are still a majority. And this kind of unfairness is something that legislatures, state and federal, have been utterly incapable of abolishing. The only way to get rid of that kind of racial preference has been through state ballot initiatives. And how do these initiatives turn out? Blacks and Hispanics vote in overwhelming numbers to keep those preferences. And why not? Well, when they become a majority, do you think they're suddenly going to think, gee, this is just not fair to those wicked white racists who oppressed us all those hundreds of years? No. Once they become a majority, what's going to happen to the white minority? No, I think that I'm not worried. If I were expecting the coming non-white majority to treat whites the way whites have treated non-whites for the last 50 years, I'd say go right ahead. Not going to happen. I would say that there are really two possibilities. If whites continue to sleepwalk in this browbeaten, bamboozled state in which they think that anything that they do to preserve a white majority or to promote their own interests, if they continue to think that that's somehow wrong, then the United States will become like Brazil. It'll be a nation in which there is a small number of people who live in gated communities, and they helicopter from their gated communities to their gated swim clubs and to their gated schools, while the rest of the sort of brown and black mass below is seething and bubbling. I can imagine the United States turning into a Brazil of that kind. On the other hand, if whites wake up to the fact that they face a real crisis, that their civilization, their continuation as a people, a distinct people, the distinct culture, that existence is at stake. They may do something about that and preserve at least part of the United States or some system in which they can affirm themselves as a majority people and culture. I think it is one of those two, and I think you can imagine which is the one that I would prefer for the United States. I don't want my descendants to be living in Brazil. I want them to be living in some country in which they can be proud of their ancestors, proud of their culture, and that they live in a society that reflects that culture, not some sort of crazy mishmash where everything from all around the world has come in a sort of a mutually uncomprehending, perpetually hostile state, which is what I think we will end up with unless whites wake up.
Mr. Taylor, you're an eloquent speaker. What would you say to someone that said, all of these $5 words are just a way of hiding a deep-seated racism?
Well, I might not be entirely eloquent in my reply, but if I chose to maintain a certain civility, I would say, okay, you're calling me basically a racist. What you're doing is you're calling me a name. And when you're reduced to name-calling, that's the most graceless way of admitting you've lost the argument.